All right. Good morning, everybody. All right, it is 9 a.m. We've got ourselves organized, at least myself organized this morning. All right, I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District for February 25th. With that, if we can have Deputy Chief, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you, Chief Kuklas. All right, Madam Clerk, can I get a roll call, please?
Sure. Bob Lucy, Chair.
Here.
Marsha Berg-Bigler, Vice Chair.
Here.
Katie Jung.
Present.
Von Hartung.
Here.
Jeannie Herman.
Here.
Fire Chief Charles Moore. Here. Deputy District Attorney David Wattsviel.
Here.
I'm Jan Galasini, Chief Deputy Clerk. Sir, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, we are into public comment this morning. Chief.
Comment heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the Board of Fire Commissioners' agenda. The district will also hear public comment during individual action items with comment limited to 3 minutes per person. Comments are to be made to the Board of Fire Commissioners as a whole.
Madam Clerk.
First up, we have Ms. Darcy Fletcher, followed by Mr. Cliff Lowe.
Welcome, Ms. Fletcher.
Good morning. I'm Darcy Fletcher of Washoe Valley, and I'm new at this, but I wanted to ask, from last month's meeting with the consolidation of stations 30 and 32, if I'm allowed to ask what progress has been made in securing a piece of land for the new station, and am I allowed to ask that at this point?
Public comment is not, we can't answer questions during public comment. So
Okay.
you can make statements and then staff can get with you after.
Thank you for that. I wasn't sure of that.
Yeah.
So with that being said, just want to put on record that I'm also a real estate agent, and I noticed that the parcel that Chief Moore had talked about securing in Washoe Valley for the new station, I noticed that went under contract last Monday. So I'm just wondering if that's who the purchaser might be on that. So I guess I can't get that answer yet, but just wanted to put that out there that I noticed that went into contract. So at this point, I'll give back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fletcher.
Mr. Cliff Lowe.
Good morning. For the record, Cliff Lowe, Washoe Valley. As somebody who has appeared at a number of these meetings in the recent past in strong opposition to the consolidation of stations 30 and 32, I feel compelled to explain why I wasn't here in January when it was on the agenda, especially since I'd also met or spoke over the phone with several of you about that topic. The answer is pretty simple. I was 2,000 miles away on a trip that had been planned and paid for months in advance of that meeting. Nonetheless, I was able to go to a coffee shop and stream the meeting live while it was taking place. Glad to have those services. And it probably goes without saying, but I was disappointed, not only in the result, but in other aspects too, including a lot of the questions and answers that were provided during the course of that meeting. But I'm going to save those comments for another time after I've had another chance to go through the video of that meeting and identify some specific matters. Not that I have a lot of hope that it's going to change the course of things. The comment I want to offer at this time is to focus more on the process, actually as it relates to this meeting. In particular, although I'm not as schooled as all of you are on how agendas are prepared, but I find it curious at best about one item in particular that's part of the consent agenda, and another item that has a relatively small dollar value that is a separate agenda item. And it's puzzling to me in particular why agenda item 5C, which has a current year fiscal impact of estimated over $300,000, and next fiscal year would have a much larger overall impact, although it's talked about being offset by overtime. Why that is in the consent agenda, which obviously there is an opportunity to speak to those items, but the consent agenda, both for the fire commissioners and the county commission, tend to be items that are kind of combined and they don't get the visibility. And given that this deals with personnel and staffing, which in the Washoe Valley situation is of great importance, I am surprised that this is in the agenda item, and I'll be offering individual comment on that when we get to the consent agenda shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lau.
There's nobody else signed in.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, we'll bring it back to the board and close public comment. Chief.
Item 4 is Commissioners, Fire Chiefs announcements, requests for information, topics for future agendas, and statements relating to items not on the agenda. No discussion among commissioners will take place on this item. Mr. Chairman, I have 2 announcements. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. As a result of the fact that our meeting was delayed, we're about to save you $50,000 in item 8, which we'll explain once we get to that item. And the second thing is, because it's so dry, we're going to cancel pile burning for citizens until we get some moisture to make that safer. So Adam Mayberry will treat that out to the public, but unfortunately, we're just not able to keep that sustained in our dry conditions.
Great. Commissioners, any comments this morning? Commissioner Jung.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to know about this parcel, whether or not it's under contract, and if we're under contract with the parcel that the realtor mentioned when you give your chief report. I also want to know from the attorney, what are the rules for placing items in consent or general agenda for the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection Board of Fire Commissioners? I believe for the General Board of Commissioners for the county, it's price driven. Anything under 100,000 goes into consent, anything over goes into general, but we do need a discussion and a rule set on the public record so that not only can the public understand it, but that we can understand it as a board. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jung. Any other comments? All right. Madam Vice Chair.
I think it would also, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it would also be appropriate to answer the question that was asked regarding where are we on progress in the chief's report, if you have any updates. Otherwise, if you would put it in an update for the next meeting, just so that we are keeping the citizens informed of what our progress is. This is a slow process, and we know that, but they may not really understand exactly all the hoops we've got to jump through to get anything like this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And I have a tendency to agree, Chief. I'd like to pull probably 5C out of consent this morning, just to have an actual broader discussion about it, just so we have some clarity about why it is, because it is a fairly large amount, and we're talking about a significant amount of positions. So I will probably pull 5C out of consent this morning. Any commission comments? All right. Seeing no other further commission comments, Chief, we are on to our consent agenda. Being that I'd like to pull 5C out, is there any other discussion from any of the commissioners that any other items that they'd like to see out of the consent agenda? All right. So 5C, can I get staff to, or do you want to talk about that, Chief? Or?
I'll ask Chief Kukulis to come up, and I'll just frame this issue.
Great.
The issue is our staffing up for vacant positions and anticipating that there would be some retirements in the very near future. Our timing is such that we need to start a new member academy here within the next couple of months. So that is the background.
Chief Kukulis.
Thank you. Good morning. For the record, Alex Kukulis, Deputy Chief Truckee Meadows Fire. So as the chief generally stated, I'll try and bring all these positions together. We currently have 7 actual vacancies amongst our ranks. We typically promote from within, so that all those ranks that fall down to the position of firefighter, paramedic. So we are in need of running an academy and filling those positions, and there's some economies of scale and efficiencies that go into putting the proper number into that academy. Rather than just putting our minimum number that we have now, we're also trying to anticipate with some upcoming retirements and departures and other factors. It takes about 6 months of lead time from when we start a new firefighter till they complete their academy, do their in-station training, and are on the floor and able to work. So we forecast that based on the retirements and things, as I mentioned. So what we're requesting is that we're going to fill the 7 positions we have now and then unfreeze some positions that were frozen into this fiscal year. Those positions were frozen trying to reduce some costs, if you remember back the adoption of this budget year. What that in turn did, though, is drove up the overtime costs. As you know, we have sort of fixed staffing levels at the station. We run 3 people on our engines at a minimum. And so as we've had departures over this past year, we're now on some shifts at or below minimum staffing levels, so we're incurring constant overtime. That does have a burden on the ranks as well. And it does start to affect our recall efforts, especially as we get into the busy season coming up. So in a nutshell, that's why we're asking for these positions to be unfrozen so that we can fill them. The overhires that we're asking for would be drawn down from and then frozen again as these other people depart and retire, so we would get back to our minimum staffing levels. So we're not truly adding any to the ranks. We are temporarily during the duration of the academy, but then we draw down from them again. That explains it for you.
Any questions for Commissioner Jung?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could we get a report on the staffing at each station, as well as who's subbing in for overtime and what that, where that balance fell from a fiscal analysis perspective to abandon overtime and go to full-time positions in accordance with the history that you've explained?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a brief report on that, and we can get back to you with actual numbers. But we have analyzed it over the last 8 years that we've been operating this way. We've fluctuated between, we have floaters per shift. Those floaters are extra personnel above and beyond our minimum staffing levels. We've kind of found the sweet spot to be around 2 to 3 extra people per shift. Between scheduled vacations, sick leave, injuries, other assignments, it's not unusual to at least have 3 vacancies per day. So those people then come from, those floaters get assigned to those spots in lieu of overtime. So right now we're having, like I said, up to 0 to minus employees on a shift. So that incurs additional overtime costs. So the 3 per shift would be 9 floaters in total above and
What's a
beyond.
floater? Is that a full-time employee?
It's a full-time employee, but they're not, if you did the quick math, we have, say we had 3 firefighters at every station, times 11 stations, that'd be 33 people on a shift.
Yeah.
We would have 36 on a shift, so that there's 3 extra bodies to fill.
But
for
are those
departures.
full-time equivalent employees?
They are, yes.
So there's 3 floaters that are eligible for overtime?
They do not incur overtime. They're base salary. They just get their regular wages.
Oh, so they're just assigned different stations
Yes, they
based
move,
on?
we call them a floater because they don't have a
Okay.
home station. They
Got
move
it.
wherever those, what would have been overtime, they fill in
Got
lieu of
it.
overtime.
Got it. So I need an 8-year history of staffing and what the staffing per station and what the costs are for those each years, and how that has, since you mentioned it's an 8-year history here, I'd love to see that.
Okay.
And I want it drilled down deep, not surface level, in terms of how many at each station, how much that costs, where is the cost savings coming from the firefighter, paramedic positions, et cetera. I want to see that sweet spot that you talk about. I want to see it in the data. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jung. You know, I want to agree with Commissioner Jung. I'd like to see that breakdown as well, because it's obviously we have multiple ranks within our employees, not just firefighters, but we have captains, BCs, different things like that. And so I'd like to see, you know, obviously those positions, when they get filled, who needs to fill those positions, because obviously a captain can get sick just as easy as an operator can, or a frontline individual. So how do we incur those challenges? And overtime wise, when we're talking about adding paramedic firefighters, that doesn't necessarily fulfill the vacancy of a captain or a BC. And so how do you deal with that?
So well, I guess two things. So, one, this is not a new model or concept. This is the 3 floaters per shift is actually how we've operated for the last several years. But to your question, when a captain, for example, is out sick, we have acting captains who are qualified amongst the lower ranks, and what we typically do is bump ups in that situation. So, and qualified engineer would bump up to that vacant captain spot, a qualified paramedic would move into that engineer spot, and then these floaters underfill them so that we generally utilize all of them without incurring the overtime costs that way.
And then one other question I have for you, Chief, is how many, you talk about, natural retirement from our staff. How many do you anticipate this year? And this, is it, I mean, obviously, we're on a fiscal year in what we're talking about financially, but in the calendar year, how many do you anticipate retiring from our force?
We, roughly speaking, we have about 5 people that we anticipate departing, some rather imminently.
Okay.
So that's where we got to this number. We've got, again, 7 truly vacant positions right now. These 5 extra would be to draw down from and fill those positions as they depart.
Okay, great. Any other questions by any of the board members? All right. Thank you. I'm going to leave that in consent. Just needed to have some questions answered on that. Looking for a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by
Chair.
saying aye.
We do have
Oh, I'm sorry,
public
public
comment.
comment. Thank you. Can
We
I
have-
call public comment, Madam Clerk?
Of course. We have Cliff Lowe speaking on item C1A and C1C.
You mean 5.1A?
I'm sorry, 5.1A, yeah,
5A
5.1A
and
and
5A
C.
and 5C, correct?
correct.
All right. Mr. Lowe.
For the record, Cliff Lowe, Washoe Valley. I don't know that I'll need 3 minutes for each of these items. If they are 2 separate items, I hope I would be granted that amount of time, since they're 2 separate items on the consent agenda. As for the most, will I?
No, sir, it's only one agenda item, so it's only 3 minutes, sir.
Okay. I think that the board is somewhat on track on having a number of questions regarding the staffing changes that are being made. Given that the rationale for consolidating the 2 stations in Washoe Valley is primarily one of staffing and has been presented as a staffing matter to shift staffing, to provide additional staffing, I should say, in the North Valleys within budget constraints, without increasing the budget for staffing, it is of great interest that we are, at least temporarily, it's not completely clear to me if it's a permanent change, but there are 3, 6, 7, 9 positions that are being enabled here. Last time I checked, 3 people per station, 3 shifts, 9 people. How interesting. We're looking at activating 9 positions here. And I heard reference was made to retirements, but I would think retirements free up positions. But we're looking here, and it seems like we've found room in the budget to have 9 positions here. So I certainly think this bears closer scrutiny. I hear the commissioners asking for more information about this, but I hope you can understand that to me, and I think people like me, who are very unhappy over the action that was taken relative to the Washoe Valley stations being based on staffing, that we're adding staffing here and finding room in the budget for it. As for item 5A, which is the minutes, I'm asking the board to take the somewhat unusual but not unprecedented step of asking the clerk's office to make some changes to the minutes from the last meeting. In particular, at the last meeting, 14 individuals appeared at that meeting to offer public comment in opposition to the proposal of the proposed consolidation. They are listed there. Their names are listed individually, but their comments are all grouped together. There's a list of things that said they're not attributed to individual citizens. Those citizens took the time, just like the one individual who spoke in favor of it, these 14 individuals took the time to come up, to make a longer trip, I dare say, to take the time and offer their comments on it. It's even more important, I think, that the individual comments be attributed to the individuals who made those comments, because at that meeting, more than one commissioner took issue with some of those comments. I think justifiably so. But to just aggregate them together and not, I know if I'd spoken there, I wouldn't want to be associated with some of the public comments that were made there. I think that the minutes should be changed to show what each person said. And finally, since my time is running out, I would also ask that clarification that Mr. Dean Dow from REMSA did not speak in support of consolidation. What he spoke in support of, he said that REMSA would support Truckee Meadows Fire. He did not speak in favor of consolidation. I think that should be revised as well.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe.
Can I get who the motion and second came from, please?
The motion was from Commissioner Hartung. Second was from Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you.
All right, is there any further public comment, Madam Clerk?
There is nobody else signed in.
All right, I have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We are into item 6, Chief.
Item 6 is International Association of Firefighters Local 2487 report, and President Cutts, I believe, is here to give you an update.
Perfect.
Good morning, everybody. All right, couple updates for you guys. First one is our peer support update. So Local 2487 co-sponsored a peer support class with IFF Local 731 Reno firefighters. That was held on February 6th and 7th at the Regional Training Center. 8 agencies from around the region, everywhere from Elko, Ski Patrol, Sparks Fire, Reno Fire, a ton of agencies sent people, 28 students in total. All these students now have the opportunity to become part of the Northern Nevada Peer Support Network, which is chaired up by our program coordinator, Derek Reed. This is a great education for all the first responders. It's going to continue to improve our peer support programs and mental health and wellness around the region. We do have some brochures available for you guys, for all the commissioners, from our program coordinator, Derek Reed. So if you'd like a brochure on what the Northern Nevada Peer Support Network is, we do have those available for you. We also wanted to go on record with Local 2487's stance on automatic aid and AVL within the region, given some of the other meetings that are going on around the region about this topic. So we stand with the district on wanting to provide the best emergency services possible to all citizens of the region, and we look forward to working together with other agencies and locals on this matter. And lastly, just another reminder that we do have our 8th annual Guns and Hoses Golf Tournament coming up at Lake Ridge Golf Course. It'll be held on April 27th, 2020. If you have any questions, you'd like to participate, please reach out to John Sieben, and he'll dial it in.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I do have a question. Derek Reed is with us this morning. Mr. Reed, can you come share with us a little bit of detail on the peer support program? You and I had a quick conversation about it in the grocery store, but I want a little bit free. Can I ask for that?
Absolutely, yeah.
Good morning, Derek Reed, Truckee Meadows Fire, for the record. So yes, we did have a brief conversation about the Northern Nevada Peer Support Network. So basically, we recognize that there was a larger need for peer support and mental health resources for all agencies. That includes fire, police, dispatch, EMS. So we created a website, we created a partnership in collaboration with all the public safety entities, and I believe we're up to 25 right now, including federal agencies and California agencies in the Lake Tahoe Basin. The website is basically a hub for mental health resources that are quality. Some are local, most are remote, just because our region is lacking those mental health resources. And we're a 501c3 now. We're going to start doing fundraisers, applying for grants, and also providing sponsorships to local businesses to be able to contribute to the fundraising effort to bring in quality training from outside the area. We've already done a lot of outreach within the Northern Nevada Peer Support Network, and it seems to be going very well. It's very well supported, and we had some interface with Senator Jackie Rosen and also Cortez Masto's office assistant. So they're looking also to help us find grants that will be applicable to the mental health and wellness of first responders.
Great. I think this is a great initiative that Commissioner Jung has been championing this all along, and I think through both you and the and Commissioner and obviously Chief, this is something that's been fantastic. So I want to congratulate you. I think this is a job well done, obviously, and the reception has been tremendous. So I can't be more happy with the turnout and what you guys are not just doing for 2487, but all your brothers and sisters within the industry. It's challenging no matter whether you wear, what color uniform you wear. If you're in part of public safety, you see all the same tragedy and horror day to day. So we appreciate it, and I want to thank you for spearheading that.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, it's been great. Any other discussion? Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Reed, I'm sorry, I apologize.
That's okay.
So is the direction to ultimately get some full-time staffing for, to have a psychologist or, a group of people that can work, again, regionally?
Yes, that came up with one of the offices that I spoke with, that we're all full-time employees.
Yes.
Which makes it very difficult to write a 150-page grant for
Right.
$125,000 that there's strategic planning that needs to be had.
Understood.
There's check marks, benchmarks. For a full-time employee, that's difficult to do. With the collaboration that we have, even Washoe County Sheriff's Department, Andy O'Brien, I spoke with her, and that's a full-time job.
Yeah.
We are hoping that the state will potentially help us with grant writing. If we had the time, we could do it. Maybe they'll help us out with that. We did bring on 2 psychologists as clinical advisors, we call them, and we'll probably gain more as time goes on. But Dr. Stephen Nicholas, which is also our department psychologist, is one of our clinical advisors, is also Erin Chapel. She's also one of our clinical advisors for the network.
So I guess what I'm asking is perhaps we need to form a coalition between all of the agencies
Done.
and hire someone through that coalition that's what their job is to, to staff and work interagency, regardless of what agency they're dealing with, that this resource is available.
That would be that's an amazing goal.
When you split it with a lot of agencies, the costs come down, and you can, it's much easier to do. If let's just say the SO had one and Sparks PD had one and Truckee Meadows Fire and then Reno Fire and then, all the agencies, Highway Patrol, if each one had that same FTE, that same person working, it's just a duplication of services.
Yes, sir. So our board of directors is made up of, when I set up the board and I initially chose my board, and then the next year and 2 years there'll be voted positions. However, I deliberately divided each board of director position as a service branch. So there's a fire board of director, there's a professional hospital professionals board of director, there's a dispatch board of director, and there's a law enforcement board of director. So they're very diversified, so when we have conversations on when we do start fundraising to have money, we discuss how that money is spent, how it's equally divided, and inclusivity is one of our core values, and we talk about that all the time.
But I guess what I'm suggesting, Mr. Reed, is that we as electeds collectively get together with all of the other electeds and put a line item in our budget and say, look, there's a need to have a regional, like the regional training center.
Understood.
Right? And so,
Yes.
so they could even be housed at the regional training center as an example. And so you have this staff of people that would deal with these issues, again, regionally. It doesn't matter whether you're Sparks or Washoe County or Reno or state. It makes no difference that everyone has this same resource available to them.
I understand what you're saying now, and that would be an amazing collaborative effort, for first responders in our area.
Okay.
And I'm welcome to have that conversation. And we're moving in the direction. We have a goal. Our objectives are within the same alignment as that goal. A lot of this is we don't know what it looks like because it's really never been done exactly like we're doing. But it's
Understood.
receiving tremendous support. So if you have ideas, I would love to hear them, and that's an excellent one, and I would love to talk to you about it.
I think collaboratively, it would just be much easier. You know, it's interesting because, you know, my dad was a World War II vet, and PTSD was not recognized, and they came home and they self-medicated.
Yes.
And so we've buried our heads for many, 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 many years, thinking that, you know, this really doesn't exist, and we know it does. We know it does. And we're
Absolutely.
seeing it manifest itself in a number of different areas, not just people coming home from battlefields. It's right here, right in the midst of us on an everyday level. So,
Yes, sir.
Chief, I'd like to talk more about that, and again, how we can collectively work with all of the agencies in the region, how this board can work with all the agencies in the region. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Jung, do you have anything you'd like to add this morning?
Mr. Reed, I think I asked, I don't know, a year ago, the chief to put a line item, a budget item for this type of assist. I think this is being a proper employer, frankly, when we ask people to go into the line of fire and have to deal with that afterwards. And I've never seen that line item budget. We've seen the unions put money into it and their time, but we've not seen this singular board do it. So before we go out and shop this around, we got to put money behind what we believe in as well. And before we go regional, I'd rather just talk about who I actually have responsibility for. So it's not just you, the fire, it's our sheriff's deputies, it's also our emergency social workers that go out and pull children out of some pretty serious situations, or adults and seniors who've been abused in situations. Our administrator goes through some quite terrible situations. So if you want to talk about trauma, let's talk about the trauma that's affecting people I can control and put budget money to. And then, I mean, even to take it a bit macro level, there's trauma every day for anybody that works in a public service agency, considering the attacks with armed gun people coming in and taking over whole San Bernardino as an example. So before we get too big, I think we need to define the problem. And then the other thing is, we've hired a psychologist, but I thought that psychologist was largely going to collect data and provide you best practices, because this is evolving every single day, our trauma research. And actually, war-torn trauma is hard, but it's very well recognized today. We don't recognize PTSD in everybody sitting up at this dais right now, even and all the people out here that have experienced PTSD for a number of reasons of trauma in their childhood or happening today. So until this board puts up money for the fire service, who by themselves, this fire union decided to take this on by themselves, Mr. Reed, because you've been in this for so long and have seen the destruction. Also, we had some suicides of our own people that we hire. I would, this board needs to put some money up.
Yes,
As far
ma'am.
as I'm concerned, and maybe that comes through our health plan, maybe that's a line item budget, but I've never seen that proposed.
Yes, ma'am. So we do have a budget. It was.
How much is your budget, Mr. Reed?
We started off at 25.
Thousand?
Well, we brought that down to balance the budget, because it was distributed between the peer support team and the chaplains that we brought on. And then when we brought that down to, I believe it was 20, I can't remember how much that.
I wonder if there's a way to, Mr. Chief, Fire Chief, I'm sure this is not an original idea, it just requires some investigation. I wonder if there's a way that we can assess a traumatic event, and then automatically money is put over into this pot. Do you see what I'm saying? Per call? Your psychologist could come in and rank the trauma for the event, and then this money would go into a pot to be used. $25,000 is nothing. I'm sorry,
Right.
that's nothing to me, and I'm not rich. But if you gave me $25,000 for the year, I would say it would take me more money to write the check when I'm looking to do this type of thing, right, in my life. And again, my husband works for the state, I work for the county. We don't make big bucks, but 25 grand for a year is nothing for a program.
Well, actually, we started at 15. I remember the numbers now. So we started at 25. We came down to 15. And then it was increased when we brought Dr. Stephen Nicholas on. And that was just for a 6-month pilot.
Okay.
So when that pilot is up, we're probably going to be reconfiguring what that looks like over a fiscal
Who
year.
paid for that, 15 or 25?
That came, the 15 was in our peer support chaplain budget.
Came from the union,
No, ma'am.
came from the chaplain budget,
That came from the district's budget.
an existing chaplain budget.
The chaplain, it was a combined chaplain peer.
Right, so there really was no budget, line item budget for that. And chaplain, wonderful, I think they should be volunteering for that, because there's no data to support that. I want the science.
We have data, we have hours that they've served and things that they've done, and they've actually put on classes for us. They just
That's not
put
what
in-
I'm talking about.
Oh, okay.
And it's way into the weeds anyways, because I believe this is a volunteer thing that you're doing, correct? Or are you being paid to do this?
It's a collateral duty. I take it upon myself to do it. The Northern Nevada Peer Support Network, that is my thing aside from the department. But it also
Okay.
supports the
Okay,
department.
so this is a nonprofit, Mr. I don't know any of this, so I probably need a better briefing and update.
No problem.
Which is really, if it's your own individual nonprofit that has nothing to do with us, that's none of my business. But if it impacts this board, this budget, our employees, then that is my business.
So the Northern Nevada Peer Support Network is the nonprofit. Sorry, Josh Cutts, President, Local 2047. The Northern Nevada Peer Support Network is the nonprofit. That's the 501c3 that Captain Reed he's on the board of directors of. Truckee Meadows has a peer support team that is funded by Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District on the county side of things in a collaboration with the association. So like the association and Local 731 co-sponsored this peer support class to get our members
Gotcha.
the training to a tune
Hence
of
all the
like
media, yeah.
Right,
gotcha.
so that was to the tune of like $9,000 that we split with Local 731 to get
Okay.
our members trained to go back and provide peer support to,
Did 731 pay that money from their general fund or from their union?
from their union.
That's my point. We need to put more organizational resources behind that. If this board agrees, that's just one commissioner's idea. I think we need more organizational push behind this so that we actually put our money where our mouth is. And again, I don't think $25,000 a year that's a pittance, especially when you're dealing with professionals. So,
nice thing
but if
about-
you say it's enough, forget it. Don't let me champion it.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying the Northern Nevada
Yes,
Peer
sir.
Support Network will help supplement some of that cost for both the union and the district through fundraising, sponsorships. They'll bring the classes in, or at least supplement those classes with local government and unions. So it's working together. It's within unity, we find strength, which is our model for Northern Nevada Peer Support Network. I know it sounds
Very
good,
well.
doesn't it?
All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. President Katz, thank you. All right, we'll bring it back to the board chief. Item 7, Fire Chief's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question was asked about the land under contract, and legal counsel advised me to put that under announcements because it's not agended under the fire chief's report. So with your permission, I'll address the land purchase under the last announcement topic.
That's fine.
So Mr. Mayberry was approached by volunteers from Summit Christian Church and also Sun Valley GID about doing a cleanup for the greater Sun Valley community, and we're looking at May 16th to do that. Looking at the district paying for dumpsters as well as some volunteer manpower. Also working with Summit Christian Church volunteers, and to what extent the GID will participate, I'm sure they'll have a role in it. But we're looking somewhere within Sun Valley so that people can clean up their yards, have an easy place to dispose of the things that they want to do to clean up their yards or their homes, and the district will take care of the disposal. So this is still evolving. We're still targeting May 16th, which is a Saturday. Nevertheless, we're likely looking at about 10 very large dumpsters somewhere around the Raley's parking lot to do this. Item 2 is the spring green waste collection update for Sun Valley and Spanish Springs. Largely our efforts have been in East Lake and in Silver Lake, but we're looking for a site that's close to Sun Valley and Spanish Springs, about halfway to where we could do this We think we have a site located, but I need to contact the landowner to make sure that we could move forward with that. So if all that works out, I'll report back in a month or two, and we'll plan that for sometime around spring as people clean up their yards. Brief update on our new lease of 3663 Barron Way. The new Cat 6 cable is being pulled this week. County IT is installing our routers. We're looking at a new phone system. So there's a lot of work to do in the next 10 days, but we're looking at occupying on March 9th. I wanted to take just a minute to explain and make sure that the board understood in my last presentation how this is kind of a cost-neutral effort for us. We currently pay the county somewhere around $126,000 for our space that we lease in Building D on the second floor. We're paying about $100,000 for our lease on Gregg Street for logistics and for fleet maintenance. And we also pay about $50,000 to the Regional Public Safety Training Center for use of classrooms and use of the drill grounds. We lumped all three of those into an aggregate total, which roughly equals the cost of the new lease. But I wanted to make sure that the board understood that it was district's staff's intent to not participate again in the Regional Public Safety Center budget for the reason that we've had a very difficult time in reserving classroom space. So from our point of view, we're spending $50,000, but we have few opportunities to actually lease a classroom. And we've been working with Brian Dominic about that problem. And kind of what happens is an agency will go in and reserve 2 or 3 weeks at a time, and it's theirs whether they use it or not. So it's, in my opinion, it's not a very good system in reserving classroom space. So from our point of view, we're spending a lot of money, but not being able to use the facility to the extent that we need to. In our new building, we will have an expansive classroom. And in fact, I've talked to Aaron Keniston, I don't know if he's still here, but it is a space to where we could even use this area as a secondary EOC if there were some catastrophic event that would affect our primary EOC. We could move the EOC over to the new building. So again, I wanted just so the board knew what I was doing, explain the money behind that, and in fact that it's as close to cost neutral as we could make it. Item 4, update on mutual and automatic aid. Chief Kuklas and I have been talking to Chief McNamara and Chief Cochran at the City of Reno on a couple of occasions about trying to get us closer to automatic aid to where the closest unit would go to the call, regardless of jurisdiction. I believe I heard the Reno City Council express a desire to have a joint meeting, the next time they have a joint meeting with this board, with the county commissioners, to put that on the agenda and have that discussed. I believe that it's going to take policy direction from this board and from Reno City Council to its staff to say, move this forward. Unfortunately, for our staff, we do not control the server, nor do we control the software, so we're really powerless to be able to move this issue forward, other than to say that we are ready and willing to be able to respond no matter where the emergency is, if it happens to be down the block or across the street, because we know that there are critical emergencies that happen just a few feet from our stations, and maybe even vice versa from the city of Reno to us. And there's no quick way of dispatching the emergency responders to that emergency except by dispatch protocols. AVL already exists. That technology is there. So what we really need to do is to make some effort to get that thing going. And I'm at a loss to explain why it's been taking now almost 2 years, and we really don't seem to have much progress made, but nevertheless, there is being progress made in the CAD-to-CAD realm, which is where we would have the interface with REMSA to Reno Dispatch and to Washoe County Dispatch. I do know, in defense of all the players, that has been a very, very, very heavy lift to do technologically, because it's been a lot of programming that hasn't worked. But I think for the future, we have had some discussions about maybe the solution is to have a co-located dispatch center to where then it all becomes very easy to send the closest unit. Technology is evolving to where if we're all on the same dispatch platform, that may not be necessary. I've heard that Reno is contemplating moving its police dispatch to the RGJ building. Perhaps Reno Fire will follow that at some point. REMSA may co-locate with either Reno or with us, or they may stay where they're at. But I do know if we do upgrade dispatching software to where all have the same system, that the system of sending the closest unit dispatch and sharing information in a timely way will be solved. So there is, our frustration is just, we'd like to see some progress made on this, but nevertheless, I think it's important for the board to discuss that with your elected counterparts at the city of Reno, and perhaps even the city of Sparks.
Chief, the vice chair has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, is there something we need to do financially to make sure that we are ready whenever the city of Reno gets to the point where they are ready to put this up and running? Do we have something else that we need to spend money on to make sure that we can interconnect with them as soon as they're ready?
Well, I think the secret there, again, is to make sure that we're purchasing the same software as the city of Reno and make sure that city of Sparks is on that, and REMSA. They're being, and Chief K, you can help me out if I'm missing something in this, but I know we are looking at new systems. The timing of that is probably on the near term, but nevertheless, our software needs to be upgraded, so it just makes sense that all 4 of those agencies are on the same system.
Okay, a follow-up on that then would be, this is an issue that's so key to this community. It's being done in much larger communities than ours, right here in this state. Technology being what it is today, it would seem illogical to insist that we all sit in the same office, if you will. There doesn't seem to be any reason, from my perspective, that we couldn't be wherever we want to be. But to not be able to figure out how to make this work in this community is inexcusable. And I think we need to do everything we can from the perspective of not just the fire board, but from this perspective of the commission, because our constituents are the ones who are in danger because we're not sending the nearest or the quickest or the one that's most capable. And I know that TM is working very hard and has done a super job on that. So I'm certainly not in any way, please, firefighters out there, don't think I'm criticizing our team, because I'm certainly not. But I do think that this is such an important issue that we absolutely must do whatever we can or whatever needs to be done to make sure we're protecting citizens who are in areas that are further out or that 30 minutes to get to somebody who calls for a heart attack is just too late. Somebody has a stroke, too late. Somebody has an automobile accident and there's serious injuries, too late. We have got to figure out how to fix this and fix it sooner rather than later. I know I've been harping this since I got elected, and obviously I'm not very effective because I'm starting my 8th year and I'm still harping on the same thing. I am happy to say that we do have on today's agenda for the BCC that we are starting to put money out to hire staff, and that's on our agenda today for the BCC to hire staff to make sure that we're up and running the way we're supposed to be up and running. And so I'm glad about that. But I think, again, I just can't, I see Ms. Holt still sitting out here in the audience, and I know she will get up and say, what are we going to do about the people in Lemon Valley when we've got roads blocked off and the fire trucks can't get there and the ambulances can't get there? I just can't tell you how important this issue is. I know you know that, but it just is one of those things that's just frustrating me because we can't seem to figure out how to make this work. And so I guess what I'd say to you is, please, you guys make sure that you're sticking with the city of Reno and see whatever service they're going to buy and make sure that we are doing the same thing. I mean, even if it means we have to buy something that we don't think is really the best one, but that's what the city of Reno decides, we simply have to get on board with this. And if that means means we have to make, an exception for them, then let's do it. Let's just make sure we're doing what we can.
Chief
Thank you,
Kukulis
Mr.
now
Chair.
sits on the E911 board, and so he has a little more intimate knowledge than I do with respect to progress being made, so.
Well, I'll just briefly add, again, Alex Kukulis, Deputy Chief. The current Ciberon Mobilecom system that we're on just went through a recent upgrade. It's in the final phases of testing. It has all the functionality to do what you're asking us to do. So there really is no excuse that we can't do it right now. I think what it really rises to, like the chief mentioned, is a policy level decision at this point in time and giving some direction and timelines to staff at all levels, dispatch, et cetera, to get this done. I was up here several years ago saying the same thing. So I do hope that comes out of that joint meeting. And to the point about I do sit on the E911 board. We're currently about to pursue the RFP process to select a new CAD, which would then take this one's place in a couple of years. Again, the functionality is there now. It would, of course, be there then too. But it's a matter of, are we willing to cross borders and do this stuff the way it should be done? Not so much can we.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Chief.
Item A5, we are about to begin negotiating with Tumwa on an agreement for hydrant maintenance, and I wanted the board to understand what it is we want to do. I'll ask Chief Solero and Chief Way to come up to the podium and talk a little bit about the issues. Who is actually responsible for hydrant maintenance and the laterals that connect to the water line is a little bit in flux. I know Tumwa has a strong position on who, and so do we, but I think we have a solution that we want to propose to you and make sure that you nod your heads in the affirmative for us to proceed. So if either one of you would kind of frame the issue and talk a little bit about how the deal will be brokered.
Dale Way, Deputy Fire Chief at TM, for the record. So in looking at this from a bigger perspective, NRS 704.660 talks about responsibilities of public utilities, including fire protection, how it's serving a community, as well as maintenance of the hydrants and all associated parts of the system. So in looking at this, it's been a kind of a long-term issue apparently for TM and between TM and Tumwa. And one of the solutions that we're considering is the possibility of them relocating a pump station to a section of our property at Station 33, and as well as potentially other, trying to think the right word for that, other items of consideration.
So in exchange for that land that we would provide Tumwa at Station 33, they would agree to do our hydrant maintenance and fix the laterals in perpetuity. So we just want to get out of the hydrant maintenance basis. It's not our area of expertise, although James Solero, who's actually a registered fire protection engineer, has a lot of expertise, but go ahead, James.
Yeah, I was going to say, James Solero, Battalion Chief, Truckee Meadows Fire. Basically, right now, over the last 8 years with Truckee Meadows Fire, we've been doing all of the maintenance on all the fire hydrants. And anytime something breaks underground, as you might understand, we don't have dump trucks. We don't have backhoes. We don't have the knowledge or expertise to go dig that up and fix it. So we've had to go out and hire these projects to be done. And in the same fashion, yearly, the hydrants need to be maintained. And we've been going out with our engine companies to do that, where the City of Reno, City of Sparks have an agreement with Tumwa to do that for them. We've been working towards that to work with Tumwa. However, there's some things in the contract that we have issues with, and that is, like Chief had mentioned, the ownership of everything from the valve in the street all the way to the top of the hydrant. It's not, none of these items are on our asset list with Truckee Meadows Fire. And so we're in a process of working with Tumwa to come to a resolution with that. And like the chief said, we're hoping that our meeting this week with them will come to fruition, and we'll be able to come up with a solution to get that out of our hands, and we'll be able to do the things that you want us to do.
Great. Commissioner Hartung.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is something I've been working on at Tumwa for a long time. And I'll use the term lightly, the inequity that Reno and Sparks have had their hydrant maintenance taken care of by Tumwa, and yet Washoe County or TM has not. And as both of you know, one of the main concerns is that if we're responsible for the laterals, we don't get to call out how the laterals are designed. So, you know, they can be just press-in fixtures or a number of other issues, and I have taken exception to that, and so I've had a number of conversations with Tumwa about this, and so, I mean, just let me know if we need to agendize an item. As you guys probably know, we pulled an item recently in Tumwa's rules, I believe it was 4 and 5, for review for these very issues.
Commissioner, you're correct. On that, the City of Reno, Sparks, and ourselves just got done coming up with a hydrant detail that would take into account exactly what you were saying. And it's now a regional detail that Tumwa has given input on. And so that, as far as when a hydrant goes in, we have this detail that is specific region-wide now.
So again, what I want to make sure of, though, is that we're not responsible for a lateral that we didn't get to design.
That's correct. So we at least have input into that now.
Good.
But the larger thing is coming back to the ownership of it.
Understood.
All right.
There have been more conversations on this than you can begin to imagine.
All right, Commissioners,
Thank you.
we're running really short on time here, and we do have another meeting following up, so I want to keep moving along as quickly as possible. Chief.
Item A6 is just an update on the development of Station 37. Don't need to give you too much information on that. We should be going to the Board of Adjustments in April. Plans are being developed as we speak, and progress is being made.
Great. All right. Seeing nothing further, I do have public comment signed in on this. Ms. Elise Weatherly. Ms. Weatherly, if you'd like to come down. Welcome, Ms. Weatherly.
Thank you. Elise Weatherly, Washoe County resident. I just kind of happened to come in here just at the time that was being announced that Summit Church was going to be helping us clean up the Sun Valley area. And I shook my head in disgust because of what Summit Church is really like. And I went out there and I was complaining, and one of the ladies says, well, go in there and make a public comment. It's not too late. So what I will say is there is supposed to be a separation between church and state, right? But we've allowed the churches to come into the state because under the guise of them helping us. Well, the interesting thing is that they help strangers and they help, projects, but when it comes to a person that actually confronted them, that your pastor lied on stage with a Bible in his hand and a smile on his face, and people do what they're doing now, they ignore it. So are we supposed to ignore what these churches do and let them go in and pretend like they're doing good for the community when they won't stand up for the word of God? I would say no. I would say let's turn them down and have them reconcile with the people that they lied to and stole from first. I will also say that since we are no longer segregating church from state, that our nation does not fear God. Somebody mentioned once an act of God. Yeah, he does those things. He comes along and he says, you don't take me at my word, you don't take me seriously, I created you and you're going to ignore me? Well, then why don't we have a few floods and things and maybe get your attention? But what people do instead is they take my money out of my pocket to pay for the mistakes of others because that seems the good and right thing to do. It's not. If a person works for a living and they do what's right, they stand up for the truth, then by golly, thank you, God, that I have the opportunity to stand in front of this board and say, don't support a church whose pastor lies. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weatherly. Chief, 7B and C, are there anything we need to highlight on those items this morning?
No, sir.
All right. Commissioners, are there any comments on those? At this time, looking for a motion to accept the report. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Hartung? Place your, could you please affirm your votes on your screens? Motion carries unanimously. All right, Chief, we are on to item 8.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know time is short. If the board would like to defer this to March, we could, but I think this will go pretty quick.
Let's move through it quickly.
All right, Mr. Mayberry is going to give a quick update. I would mention that in the fiscal note, we're proposing to spread the cost over 2 to 3 years and
Okay.
not just one.
Okay. Mr. Mayberry.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Fire Commission, Chief Moore. I'm Adam Mayberry, your Communications Manager for the record, and I will be brief. I have a pleasure and have an opportunity to introduce and unveil our new logo pending your approval and input going forward. So this, I'll go through this fairly quickly. This is, I'd like to think, a very lighthearted item. I hope you'll enjoy it real quick. Give you a quick history. These are some of our patches going back to the inception of Washoe County. You can see the Sierra Fire Protection District was essentially adopted as our patch and our kind of more of an informal logo that we use today. You can see that on our Class B uniforms. You don't see it on our apparatus. So on our apparatus, we don't have logos. As we went through this process, we developed a handful of logos using an organization here, a local organization called OCG Creative. In fact, Chelsea and Jill are in the back of the room. Really wanted to have a discussion with our staff, and so these are a variety of fire district logos that we put forward and surveyed our staff and our firefighters. Fire service logos can be very busy. It was really our goal to create something that was clean, that was representative of the region in which we live and serve, and something that really is traditional. We heard a lot of feedback from our firefighters that tradition, that history was very important. We, after we got some feedback from our staff, we created a small working group. I want to give a shout out to Deputy Chief Alex Kukalis, who was really kind of the glue that kept us together, kept us on task. Also want to give a shout out to Engineer Jesse Corletto, who back in the early stages really helped kind of raise awareness of the importance of branding. And that's really what we haven't had for some time, and we've talked about it a lot, but really trying to create a brand, something unique for Truckee Meadows Fire. Again, a lot of feedback that we got was the tradition, the Maltese cross that you'll see in the final design. We got a lot of feedback about the mountains. Our staff really like the mountains. And so this is what we've been using today. This is what we have designed and have proposed going forward. It is a kind of a traditional look with the Maltese cross. History, again, is important. We celebrate our 50 years in 2020. We're moving into new headquarters. We'll be rolling out a new website. So now is the time to really kind of raise the level of awareness of Truckee Meadows Fire. The mountains were important, so we kind of made this mountain our own. This is, you can see the mountain, it's essentially Slide Mountain. A lot of logos have something iconic to the region that they serve. We wanted to kind of show our geography and terrain. And of course, that gradient look behind the mountain represents the stunning and spectacular sunsets that Northern Nevada is known for. And you can see it's much, it's cleaner. It's not as busy as a lot of the other fire symbols with other, with ladders, fire hydrants, tools like axes and pike poles. Again, wanted to keep it clean. Something notable is you'll see the fire and rescue. We want to become branded more as a fire and rescue agency because, as you know, wildland fires, structure fires are certainly some of the high-profile incidents we respond to, but most of our responses, as you know, are medical responses or rescues, ice, water rescues, right? Backcountry rescues, rope rescues, auto extrications, even animal rescues. Just a few weeks ago, we rescued a domestic horse out of a pool. We've lifted up storm drains to rescue ducklings. So a lot of those kinds of elements really fit into the fire and rescue, and a lot of fire agencies are moving in that direction. And you know the iconic TM, Truckee Meadows, a lot of the sharp edges kind of represent the tools that firefighters use. The gold standard, TM is in gold because that's what we continue to aim to achieve, is a gold standard in the fire district. Implementation is cost. Obviously, there'll be a cost for this. We've identified a cost of about $9,500 over the course of a couple of years. We certainly need to change our patches, need to create decals for our apparatus, signage, those kinds of things. We're running low on letterhead and business cards. So as we need to update marketing collateral, we'll do that incrementally. The logo colors, our new engines are kind of a black with a gold leaf and red, and so that reflects the colors of our new logo going forward. So that concludes my remarks. Appreciate your time. It's been a wonderful process, and again, I want to thank all of our staff and firefighters and for chiming in and providing some great input. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any discussion by Commissioner Hartung?
Just a fast question. Mr.
Yes.
Mayberry, how will the sky translate into embroidery? I mean, everything else is very simple, it's easy, it's very clean, but that transition from sort of a pink to a red can be somewhat problematic for an embroiderer.
Commissioner Hartung, I appreciate the question. We actually got a sample of the patch, and you're right. There are going to be some graphics like the patch that won't have that gradient design.
Okay.
So the patch would be solid red.
Solid
I appreciate you bringing that up. So from time to time, you will see that solid red, depending on what it is. Thank you.
Well, I have a lot of experience with logos. It's nice. Thank you.
All right, seeing no other further questions, I do have public comments signed in on this. I'll take public comment. First, I have Mrs. Darcy Fletcher, and followed by Mr. Cliff Lowe.
Hello again. Thank you for letting me speak on this issue. Couple of things. Money. 11 people on this working logo board. I'm questioning how much time was spent and money spent to come up with this. And noticing the patches that in the past 20 years, 15 years, now we're working on 8 years on this new logo. I find this utterly ridiculous, an expenditure of this type of money. You say an estimate of $9,500. Is that a true cost? Does that take into consideration all of the time and effort that was put on with the 11 people on this working logo board group? And as a citizen calling 911 in an emergency, I don't give a crud what's on your patch. I want to have someone take care of me. I'm not going to take the time to look at what's on that little patch. I'm just there for, I want the emergency services, and I find this like a slap in the face, especially having Slide Mountain on that logo. I'm in Washoe Valley and you're taking one of our stations away. I am a true opponent of this. Thank you.
Mr. Lowe.
I have nothing to add to Mrs. Fletcher's comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. All right, seeing no further public comment, I'll bring it back to the board at this time. With that being said, looking for a motion.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion from Commissioner Hartung, second from Vice Chair Burke-Bigler. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, Chief, item 8 is item 9, I'm sorry. This is the, we can take this, how quickly can we run through this?
Very quickly.
All right, sir. Move, please.
Item 9, I will not read the entire subject line into the record. This is a resolution to adopt $4.415 million worth of bonds. I spoke earlier that just because our meeting was delayed a week, we're actually saving $50,000 in finance costs over the life of the bonds. So I will let John Peterson, our financial consultant, who's joined by Kendra Follett, our special counsel from Sherman and Howard, make a brief presentation and seek the board's approval.
Mr. Chair, I do have a handout to distribute to the board and place on file.
Thank you. Sir.
John Peterson, for the record, with J&A, excuse me, J&A Consulting Group. While that handout's being passed around, I'll echo the comments of the chief that because of the delay in the approval last week of this bond item, interest rates fell by about 20 basis points, 0.2%. And so one of our bids, and the bid that we are recommending the board accept and move forward with from Chase Bank, their interest rate dropped from a 1.7% down to a 1.5%. And so just really high-level review of this. We sent out bids for this bond back at the end of January, received those bids back, initial bids on February the 5th. In total, we received bids from 10 banks, and in the handout you can see that the interest rates varied. Many of them in the 2% range, 2% and about 2.5%, but overall very good results. At this point, we would recommend the board go forward and approve this bond. It will be a 10-year bond for $4,415,000. The interest rate indication from Chase Bank, again, is 1.5%. And just the other final note I would make is that as we are required under statute, the district went and received approval from the State Department of Taxation for this bond. That approval is in your agenda packet, and I just wanted to highlight that as well for the record. But I will answer any questions if the board have any.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Johnner, have you signed in?
Yeah, I know we're trying to hurry through this, but this is a very important item. How long is this, will we be carrying this note?
The term of the note is 10 years. So assuming approval today, we would close the bond March the 10th. Our final payment would be March 1st of 2030.
Okay, and then Mr. Fire Chief, this is 8 pieces of equipment, correct?
Correct. 5 Type 1 engines and the balance in Type 5 wildland trucks.
What's their length of use? What do you expect? How long they'll be in use by TMFPD?
The Type 1 engines, 10 years of frontline service and 5 years in reserve status. The Type 5s would probably go 15 to 20 years.
Okay. I was just wanting to make sure that we're not doing crafty loans that now I believe new automobile people are doing for 10 years for a loan on an automobile to get people into the Mercedes of their dreams. So I wanted to make sure that our lifespan matched at least to some extent how long we'll be paying on this. So with that, I thank you for your financial expertise, and Mr. Chief for your feedback. I approve this.
All right. Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
All right, I have a form and a motion.
Second.
Motion from Commissioner Jung, second from Commissioner Herman. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Oh, I don't have public comment, but is there public comment? Do you have public comment signed in? Seeing no public comment, we'll bring it back to the board. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. All right, Chief, we are on to item 10. Are we in need of a closed session today?
Yes, sir, we are.
All right, looking for a motion to move into closed session.
How will that work? Will we do it later?
We'll probably we'll do closed session later today. We'll recess this meeting, do closed session, and then we will conclude this meeting at the end of our closed session.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second.
No.
Okay, motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Please place your votes on your screens. Motion carries unanimously. Please affirm your votes. Chief, we are on to our final commissioners and chiefs announcements. Chief.
Our ladder truck is here, being outfitted with equipment and radios, and should be in service in about 30 days.
Great. All right, commissioners, anything? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to our final public comment. Madam Clerk, do you have anybody signed up for final public comment?
Have Mr. Cliff Lowe, followed by Ms. Elise Weatherly.
I don't want to, Cliff Lowe, Washoe Valley, for the record, I don't want to be insensitive to the fact that it's after 10 o'clock, but I only take a little bit of responsibility for that. I wanted to share a couple of things. Excuse me. My disappointment that agenda item 5C where some very good and pointed questions were asked regarding staffing, that at least one commissioner didn't ask the chief, how much harm would there be to wait until the next meeting on this item to get answers to the questions that were posed, so that the approval of this item might be done with answers to those questions that I think were very pertinent to this agenda item. But what's done is done on that. The chief mentioned earlier in the meeting that he was going to talk about the purchase of the land for the proposed new station for Washoe Valley. I believe he said he was going to do it during announcement this meeting, during the meeting today, but he didn't. Nonetheless, I do have a comment on that. I would like to read to you the motion from the January 21 meeting that was passed unanimously. It was ordered that Chief Moore's presentation be accepted and staff be directed to prepare recommendations for the consolidation of Station 30 at Bowers and Station 32 at East Lake with the development of a new station. Then it goes on from there. Nowhere in that motion do I see any authorization for Truckee Meadows to enter into any contract for any purchase of land. So I don't know if, I'm not privy to the information. The chief would know at most if Truckee Meadows is the party that is under contract for that land. But if Truckee Meadows is under contract for that land, I submit to you, and you could ask your district attorney, I would submit to you that that was done without proper authorization. Otherwise, somebody else has their hands on that land, and Truckee Meadows will have to look for another parcel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe.
Ms. Elise Weatherly, followed by Mr. Sam Dene.
Elise Weatherly, Washoe County resident. What I want to tell you guys, first of all, is that I wonder if sometimes you think, what is she doing here? Doesn't she have anything better to do? And I will tell you that every minute that I spend here is a minute of things that I don't get done because I can't get everything done. But what I've discovered is that telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth is better than me keeping my house immaculately clean. My mother and my mother-in-law kept immaculate houses while their families were destroying each other. So I'll stick with telling the truth instead. What I will say is that I want to give some good reviews and some bad reviews. You guys have a hard job. Trying to please men is very hard. I would suggest we try to please God instead because he's the only one that we can actually please in the end anyway. I will tell you that if you have an elderly parent in your life still, I would not take them to Hearthstone. Hearthstone has a philosophy of their activities director where, while I was trying to play music there and asking the crowd, what would you like to hear? And I heard a whisper and a sigh behind me, and I looked behind me, and there's an armless and a legless man. I could barely hear what he was saying, so I leaned closer, and he said, Fleur-de-Lis. So I said, okay, I will learn that song. And later I tried to find Edna. What is his name? I said, oh, there's so many of them. I don't know who they are. Let me come back and play music. No, not even a return phone call. I would not recommend Hearthstone to anybody. I would not recommend the Seasons of Reno to anybody. They hired a man named Colin Ross who does drugs and alcohol to fill the void in his life. He was caught for DUI, and yet he is in charge of the healing ministry at Renown, and they pay him to play for their group. There was a man there that was considered himself an atheist. He would come and play and listen to me play and sing every gospel song I played, and we had deep discussions, and he listened to me. Well, he died, and they won't let me come back in because I object to their having Colin Ross as their lead person. What I will say, too, is that people that don't want to hear the truth, you know what they do? They hide. You know why they hide? They might lose something. They might not stand up and say, oh, somebody at Silver Legacy lied to the state of Nevada with an unemployment claim. They're afraid to tell the truth because they might lose something. They might lose their job. They might lose their money. They might lose their life. I have a brother-in-law who says, well, everybody disappears when they die. Well, he was the brother-in-law of Zodiac victim Darlene Farron. Why do you think the district attorneys, the detectives, the medical forensics, all these people, why do they work so hard to find out who the bad guy was? If the bad guy, when they die, they just disappear. Like when Richard Allen Davis, murder of Polly Klaus, when he dies, is he just going to disappear? It doesn't matter. What does it matter, right? How about the biased judges and the bias towards the homeless in this community, where those of us that have worked hard and have tried hard get very little except criticism, mocking, condemnation, and persecution. It's so much fun. Thanks, guys. Got to go do work.
Mr. Sam Dene.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Dene.
Thank you. Sam Dene, the guard angel. And Ms. Weatherly, I watch her come down here, and she comes down with very poignant points to be thought about. I'm an Air Force Academy graduate, spent many years flying fighters and bombers, and after my airline, Pan American World Airways, was blown out of business by the terrorist, I started to come into government meetings starting in about 1993, and I've attended virtually every meeting in the community since then. Washoe, Reno, I used to go to the airport meetings, they stopped televising them, so it was preaching to the choir. At any rate, what we are right now, and I'll be brief, maybe it's too late for that, I'll be brief. Anyway, we're on the fire department closing statements by citizens, and once again, I want to be the citizen who wants to remind the citizens of Reno and Washoe County that our area has the best, there isn't, I won't say it best, there is no better fire department in the nation than what we have right here in Reno. And the record shows it. Nothing is perfect, but the record shows that we have a phenomenal fire department, meaning Reno, Washoe, and Sparks. They're all separate, but they're all combined, and they are a great fire department. And as a quick, one of the most important parts of our fire department that we now have is firefighting C-130 airplanes. And she's nodding her head. She knows it. The background of that is I was the person, the driving force, that saved the Air National Guard and was instrumental in the Air National Guard. And this isn't self-ingratiating because the media is afraid and scared to report the truth, so I have to be my own cheerleader. At any rate, I was the driving force that brought the C-130 for the Air National Guard when they wanted to get fighter planes and the county wanted them to get fighter planes and the airport wanted them to get them fighter. I said, no, C-130s. They got the C-130s. That was over 20 years ago. I also fought hand and tooth to get them to get firefighting C-130s. I spent 10 years doing that. And you know what? It turned out there was some discontinued antediluvian regulation that said you can't get the military involved until the civilians call them in. So the city of Reno never got the firefighting C-130s. Now, in the last 3 or 4 years, they finally got the firefighting C-130s. And once again, the media, and they've got other things to write about, but when there's the person who comes to the podium with Sam's gravitas year after year after year, he should get the gravitas because that's half of Donald Trump. How does he get anything done? Because he's got the gravitas of going out in the public and telling them what to do. And I'm not saying he always does it right, but the media should be dismantled because of their dereliction of duty.
Thank you, Mr. Dene.
There's nobody else signed in.
Great, thank you. Seeing no further public comment, we'll close public comment, bring it back to the board. We are adjourned from Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District. If we can give us about 7 minutes to reorganize here, we will come back and start right promptly at 10:30. We're not recessed, I'm sorry, we're in recess. We're not adjourned, we're in recess. Thank you.